when we started getting heavy air raids, and it was quite obvious that not only were the Allies getting nearer, but they were starting to take air raid precautions, which they didn't before. And they dug this tunnel in the side of the mountain alongside our camp, saying that is our shelter. Every time there's a raid, everybody had to go in there. But to make sure there was medical attention, we had a Dutch doctor, Dutch officer who was a doctor, who was our medical officer, and they asked for 2 volunteers to be stretcher bearers. Well, I'd already been a first aider in Civvy Street, you know, St John's ambulance chap, and this other fellow, RAF chap with me, he knew a bit about first aid, so we volunteered. In any case, by that time we were the only 2 people in camp strong enough to lift a stretcher with anybody on it. So they said, well, in the event of an air raid, you will not go in the shelter. You must be available elsewhere. So they dug a slip trench in the mountainside above this tunnel, but not much bigger than this settee, and they sent 2 guards out with us. But every time there were air raid, they used to tip us out of there, and they'd dive in there, and we'd just sit on the grass, and we watched our own aircraft coming past, shooting up trains in the valley below, and we knew then that there must have been aircraft carriers. We were sat on the grass on the next heavy raid when they dropped the bomb, which was only just down the valley from us.
In Nagasaki.
And this blast went right past us, which felt as if somebody had brushed your face with a hot cloth. Didn't feel anything other than that, and yet the chaps a quarter of a mile away in the pit, they were they'd been on night duty, and they were ready to come back to camp for their breakfast and go to bed. And they were waiting for the raid to end, but the chap in charge, the guard in charge, said, we're not walking back while there's a raid on. You're safer here. But they still watch these planes zooming about. And then when this blast happened, as I say, all their clothes caught fire with this fire damp, and they pushed themselves down and extinguished themselves in the puddles outside the entrance, and they all came back. All their hair was shriveled and bits of their clothing was burnt, but apart from having their hair singed and a few minor burns, they were all right. You see?
Did you see?
We didn't know what it was.
Did you see firsthand the destruction? Did you?
Oh yes. Not only that, the week before, they'd come up from Nagasaki and asked for a party of 12 of our men to go and build the very first and only air raid shelter in the middle of, right in the middle of Nagasaki, and it was in the middle of the military camp there. And they all came back. What happened when we knew it was a bomb and everything went suddenly quiet, and even the Japanese didn't know what to do, but they knew that the war had finished. Somehow they knew the war had finished. You didn't make a definite arrangement, but the commandant said the guards all disappeared, left their rifles and everything. So we took over the rifles and guarding the camp, and our first thought was, what's happened to these 12 of our chaps? So we got we went to our own captain, and myself and this RAF chap and 4 others said we'd like to go down to Nagasaki to see if we can find what's happened to our fellows. We knew there'd been a heavy bombing raid, but not what it was. And he said, well, it's a bit dodgy, he said. You're going through territory where there's a lot of Japanese about still. He said, I can't let you take the rifles. He said, but take your bayonets. He said, and I'll get the Japanese commandant who stayed in our camp. He said, I'll get him to give you armbands to say who you are if you meet anybody. He said, because as far as the commandant's concerned, the only people allowed with arms to keep order are the Japanese military police. So we borrowed a lorry which ran on producer gas, did about 10 miles an hour flat out, and we got within a quarter of a mile of the city, and we could see it was still covered with haze and dust, and the railway line leading to it was still there, but there wasn't another thing above 3 feet from the ground. And there was a barricade right across the road a quarter of a mile from us, and there was a machine gun on a tripod with 3 Japanese military police there, and they stopped us and said, "You cannot go any further." We said, "Well, we've got some friends of ours there." "You cannot go any further." So I said, "Well, what's the idea of the machine gun?" He said, "Very bad, radioactive." He said, "Those people must not cross that barrier." This was their own people. They said, "If they do, we must shoot them." They were so afraid of contagion from radioactivity, that's what they were told to do. So we went back, saw our officer. He said, "Well, it looks as if our folks have had it." I said, "There's hundreds of people there with skin hanging off us and screaming about this, that and the other." I said, "They won't allow us near them. They're going to shoot their own people if they do." So we didn't give it another thought, but there came a time when they dropped 3 paratroopers to us. One was a medical officer, and he said, I expect you know there's been a special type of bomb dropped not far from here." He said, "It's radioactive." He said, "Nevertheless," he said, "we think it's probably safe now it's exploded." His famous last words, that one. He said, "So the only port within 100 miles of here," he said, "that isn't completely blocked is Nagasaki." He said, "And we've got a mine clearance team going along, moving all the debris and the floating mines and things, and we're going to bring a destroyer in and take you off if you can get down there." So we managed to get hold of a railway engine and half a dozen coaches, and somebody to stoke the engine. Surprising what you could find amongst our own chap. And we set off, and we got within a quarter of a mile of the city, and that was it. We couldn't go any further because all the lines were twisted up. In the distance, where what mine finished, down the docks, there was a gigantic pile, must have been 100 feet high, of engines and carriages that had been blown against the cliffs in one massive great heap. Everything had been cut off 3 feet from the ground. A freak explosion it was. The railway platforms were there, but the benches, seats, all
Nothing
gone.
else.
All the lampposts in the town were cut off that high. There were still walls standing. But when we got down there were thousands of people walking about, still with shredded skin and dead people everywhere. And we were walking through all this radioactive dust